Hi, Jerry.
All right. Hey, Paula, how you doing today?
Good.
Good. All right. Well, let's get things started. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first installment of our 2021 Fall Speaker Series. My name is Jerry Irish, and I'm Vice President of Sustainable St. John. And I'm here today with Kelly Williston and Paula Copeland of Port St. John. The two women are spearheading the innovative social and environmental initiatives embraced by the Port of St. John in recent years. Kelly Williston leads the health, safety, and environmental areas of Port of St. John. And under Kelly's leadership, the Port recently received recognition as one of Canada's safest employers, which was the result of a safety culture mind shift all across the organization. Kelly also leads the Green Marine File at Port St. John, implementing internationally accepted environmental standards. Paula Copeland is Director of Communications and Corporate Social Responsibility at the Port of St. John. For the past 3 years, Paula and her team have been responsible for embedding corporate social responsibility procedures and practices into their corporate culture. Before we start, I have just a couple of housekeeping things. Please ensure that your video and microphone are off during the entire presentation. If you do have questions, please use the chat window and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. And we would ask that the chat window be used for questions only, and please be respectful. Finally, we'd like to give a huge thank you to our sponsors today, Port of St. John and Commercial Properties Limited. Their support is crucial to the work we do here at Sustainable St. John in order to bring you different events like this and other things that we do. So thank you so much. So here we go. Go ahead, Paula.
Thank you, Jerry. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Jerry. And yes, firstly, I could say that we are proud to be a sponsor this year for Sustainable St. John, and glad to be here today. And Jane, who works closely with us here, is on the board of Sustainable St. John, and we really support her doing the work that she's doing there. So to start out, I thought I would begin with this slide with the photo of the west side, particularly because as we move through the presentation, there'll be a couple times where we'll reference this particular area of the port. But for the benefit of those in the city, you've probably been aware of the fact that we've been involved in a large modernization project of our west side facilities in the area of the container terminal and in those two slips that you see on either side of the green dome shed in this photo. So that project is going to complete in early 2023. And in this photo, it was from last summer. So what you see are two dredge ships right in front of the two slips that are now covered by a pier. But now you would see a pier going across there and the start of filling in of those slips in behind. As we move through the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about something that's going to be happening on the other side of the harbor at Long Wharf. And when I reference that and I talk about where the commercial fishers are currently or have been, they're not there now, they would have been in the slip here, in one of the slips here. So when I talk about that, you'll know what I'm talking about. So if you want to transition to the next slide. Thank you. So one of the things that I like to tell people about when we talk about the port and our social responsibility file is that we really are surrounded or circled by the community, both on the west side of our operations and on this side. We are fully aware that we have social impacts on the community. And in order to sort of react in a positive way to the needs of the community. We try very much to be engaged in what the priorities of the community are. The east side of our harbor, more than 20 years ago, they determined through strategic planning processes that that would be turned over more to soft use. So as we saw on the first slide, that was very commercial, active port in terms of cargo handling. This side has become more cruise oriented, softer cargoes or cargoes that have less impact. For example, at Long Wharf, you would have most recently seen large windmill parts, and that type of cargo is less invasive to the community than some other cargoes. A little further from what you see on this screen, there's an area called Lower Cove where we do bulk cargoes. And around the other side into Courtney Bay, there's the potash terminal. And in the far distance in this photo, of course, it's private facilities, which belong to Irving Oil. So this would be the main part of the inner harbor in Courtney Bay. And then the outer harbor, which you can see offshore if you're at the nature park, or if you're maybe down at Tin Can Beach, you'll sometimes see tankers out in the outer harbor. They are all destined for Canaport LNG, mostly Canaport. And again, those are private facilities. So that just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the harbor. If you want to move to the next slide, Kelly. So in that area, we have each year about 28 million metric tons of cargo. A large portion of that is over the private facilities for Irving Oil, but about 26 million of it is, and then the other part is ours. And it's a little different with containers because we talk about containers in two different ways. We talk about the number of boxes, or TEUs, and we talk about the tonnage. But the primary part of the tonnage for Port St. John that we report on is largely bulk. So we are very much a bulk port, but we have a very growing sector. We used to say our container sector was niche, but it's not now. It's getting much broader, and definitely a lot of focus on that. And to that end, you would know the West Side Modernization Project is predicted in the short term, as in after 2023, to build our capacity to over 300,000 TEUs, which is if you just think about the boxes. And right now it would be about 125 to 150 TEUs capacity. So it's going to double it, or more than double it, in the short term. And then with a second enhancement, which would include filling in those slips that we talked about on the first slide, we could go as high as 800,000 boxes per year. So we are definitely looking at a growth period for the port in this sector, in the container sector, and it's a very high focus of our team and also of DP World, the terminal operator. Other than that, the other sort of thing that's going on with thanks Kelly, with our port is cruise, and it's been quiet for the last 2 years because of COVID, and intentionally, obviously, the need for that was great, but we're looking at a return of cruise in 2022. And with that return of cruise will be some protocols that include consideration for the safe travel of the people on board and the people who work on board, but also for the population. So there's a lot of jurisdictions and destinations and governments working on these regulations now, and we'll be talking more about them over the next few months as that date comes closer. But we've had a team internally here on our business development team who's been working with on a national level, on an international level, with other jurisdictions to develop the best practices possible. So, okay, Kelly, you can go ahead. So really, the primary part of our presentation today is to talk about the social governance, environment, and economic aspects of our sustainability planning here at the port. And as Jerry mentioned at the beginning, talking about these types of activities in this way is probably new to our port in the last 5 years or so, or probably maybe 6 years. And that sort of started with a shift towards community engagement, shifting into more of a social responsible activity. And with Kelly's introduction, a real focus on what we can do on the environmental front to have a continuous improvement culture. If you want to go to the next slide, Jane. I think it's not Jane, it's Kelly working the slides. And when we looked at doing this shift, it was part of a strategic planning and thinking about how we are going to operate as an organization so that we can positively impact not only the economic aspects of what our region needs, but also how we can do it in a way that's operationally safe, environmentally aware, and with the least impact, and providing value to the community that goes beyond that economic impact. And it's important for us, it's important for ports around the world. It's become a focus in almost every jurisdiction that we all look at these environmental, social, and governance aspects of what we're doing in a different way than we did in the past. And we have to do it, and we have to continue to improve upon it. And Kelly will talk about that when she talks about how Green Marine, one of the organizations we're involved with, has shifted and changed over the years. So if you want to go to the next slide, Kelly. So this at a very high level, and I will tell you there's a lot of small words on the screen here. So if you go to our website in the About Us section, you can get the full strategic plan chart. But this is our priorities. as an organization. And we first implemented this format in 2018. And when it was created, it also paired up with the CEO goals and objectives, which then form part of the performance management structure for the entire organization. Every individual and every team or department has goals each year that they try to achieve that relate back up to the CEO's goals and also to the strategic plan. These particular metrics through this process, when we analyze them after creating it, 30% of them are related to social, environmental, governance type metrics or goals, and the rest were economic. So that was a big leap for us to have that ability to track that. And so we started to do that in 2018. And what we recognized in making this sort of change in our culture and the way we think is that we had sort of foundational things that we needed as an organization to drive that strategic plan. Strategic plan was created by board and management, but in order to make it work, you need the people and the culture of our organization to buy in and be a part of it and believe that it is, something that we all need to work together and towards. And then to support that, people and culture, you have your systems and communications and brand. And so all of those pieces work together to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve through the strategic planning process. Interestingly, in our organization now, we know that we have a very young workplace culture. We have a median age of 39, and 63% of our folks are millennials. So that creates a whole different dynamic in our organization than maybe 15 years ago. And it's really been a positive change for the way that we work every day. Also, I can tell you that 42% of our board is female, and about 50-50 we are male female on staff. So we've got a different way of behaving and operating than we might have 20 or 30 years ago. So if you want to move to the next slide, Kelly. This slide is really busy, and the only reason that I wanted to include it was just to show you the way that we speak out in terms of what we're doing, so our reporting structure, as well as take in inputs through our consultations every year. And we do a systematic process of consulting with our stakeholders in the spring and fall each year that feeds into our business planning process. And then we do have working committees, and we have some focus areas for community and industry initiatives. One is a cruise committee that started over COVID period of ensuring that we are having that two-way dialogue with our business partners and community partners in the cruise area, particularly because there's such a need for having a positive restart for cruise, and we're focused on that. And then we have some other activities in the community engagement side that would be related more to investment and connecting with people in a person way. So if anybody has any questions on this slide or wants to talk about it in the future, at the end we'll have that opportunity to sort of connect, and I'm willing to go through that with you. So next slide, Kelly. And then finally, because we needed to find a way to make our social responsibility activity conform to a standard practice, we chose last year to align our social responsibility activity and community activity with the ISO 26000 guidance. Oops, can you go back, Kelly, for a sec? On social responsibility. And the reason we chose that for the particular file was that Kelly is going to talk a little bit later about ISO and some of the other ISO standards we're pursuing. But we felt that that was a good way to have a whole toolkit around the ISO brand that that people understand globally, and so that was an internal work group that looked at the practices, and we implemented some targets, and it was a great exercise to sort of start us down the ISO road. If you want to go to the next slide, Kelly. And one of the things that we do pride ourselves on is positively impacting the community. We do that in a variety of ways. And this is where we spend a lot of our tactical time in my department, aside from just marketing and the business development side. We have a very strong focus on community engagement, and we focus on for the needs of our community on issues around poverty, around education. We developed a community education program that allows us to have that contact with students, to have them be able to think about what careers in the future they may want to do that might be related to the marine environment. We also now support very strongly arts and culture in their community through sponsorships at Imperial Theatre and the St. John Art Gallery. Right now, actually, if you went to the art gallery, or the Port St. John Gallery at the Arts Center, you would see an exhibit for a artist in residence that we've had over the last year. And I really do highly recommend it. It's beautiful pieces, and she's really captured an interesting perspective of the connection of where the port and the community meet. So it's well worth going to see. It'll be there till October 29th. And then finally, we're looking at opportunities around our properties to include connection to the waterfront, and the little picture on the bottom left corner is the marker for the Long Wharf Trail extension that we did as our Canada 150 project that brought the trail, the Harbor Passage Trail, out to the end of Long Wharf and gave some different perspectives. So we're always trying to look at ways that we can do that going forward. Do you want to go on to the next one, Kelly? In our strategic framework that we showed a little while ago, one of the areas that was there for community was something that's fairly new for us. And when we put it in there, it was a lofty goal because we didn't yet have a sort of a process to think about how we were going to do that. But over the last sort of 2 years, as we developed, can you go back, Kelly? I think it might be transitioning. Over the last 2 years, as we developed our West Side project, we had the opportunity to meet with, and I didn't say this at the beginning, so I should say it now, that we are on traditional land and waterways of the Mi'kmaq and the Wolastoqey people, and we make our economic value for the region on those waterways. That we do highly respect that as a port. But what we're doing sort of to further that relationship so that we are actively always engaged in thinking about the opportunities is that we're looking to include more Indigenous content in our educational and outreach programming. We're looking at some various ways that we can include Indigenous content in future interpretive opportunities, and they could be in and around the cruise terminals here, but they could also be perhaps in the area of Long Wharf, where we're looking at improvements around the Long Wharf slip. And then finally, we are, as a team, looking at reconciliation awareness training very, very soon. Actually, we're supposed to do it last year, but COVID caused us to move it forward because we wanted to do it in person. So that's just a few of the ways that we've chosen, beyond just talking about projects that we're doing, to deepen the relationship and our responsibility in that area. And I think the last one, is economic sustainability, which used to be the only thing we ever talked about. But in actual fact, we do have a strong foundation in this area, and it's growing, as I mentioned earlier. Our economic impact study, the last one we did, which was in 2018, showed that we have $242 million direct impact in the almost 3,000 jobs. And from that, cruise alone is 50 million. So that's why when we talk about the restart of cruise, we recognize that, cruise impacts a lot of New Brunswickers' jobs and a lot of businesses that we all enjoy as part of our community, like restaurants and attractions that we might use. And they really need the influx that cruise brings them each year. And it's very much something that they're looking forward to seeing return safely. And of course, we have always said from the beginning that we would do it when it was safe to do so. So that's definitely still part of our mind. So now, Kelly, I'll turn it over to you and you'll continue the rest.
Perfect. Thank you, Paula. I should not have been responsible for the slides. Yeah, so when we think about environment, I'll speak a little bit about some of those tangible environmental strategies that we're doing. So when we're thinking about environment, it's important to realize how our activities impact the environment around us. So recognizing that these are just transitioning here. Recognizing that our latest and largest project definitely has an impact. That's the West Side Modernization Project. We look for opportunities to offset the impacts of that project. So what we came up with, we looked at the Hazen Creek. This is down off of Redhead Road behind the industrial park. So we started a project over there. We restored the estuarine habitat within Hazen Creek by removing a series of existing steel sheet piles at the mouth of the creek that have caused an accumulation of sediment that was impeding flow, tidal exchange, and accessibility of upstream habitats by fish. The Hazen Creek project has provided the potential for up to 604,000 meters square of accessible upstream habitat. So from we removed 15 sheet piles from that location. We reconstructed the access road going down to that location as well, reinstated the boulders that were at the beginning of the access road as well. With this project, we consulted with our friends at the at ACAP, and we did a baseline study, and we'll have a 5-year study just to make sure that the efforts that we made, you know, are working appropriately, that we're seeing the results of this project. As Paula mentioned earlier on, she talked a little bit about this. She touched on green marine. This is one of the ways that we endeavor to ensure that we are purposely considering the environment through our business activities through this Green Marine program. So Green Marine is an environmental certification program for the North American marine industry. Oh, we're transitioning again. It is a voluntary, transparent, and inclusive initiative that addresses key environmental issues through its 14 performance indicators. Participants in this program are ship owners, ports, terminals, seaway corporations, and shipyards. It's a performance metrics-based program requiring every participant to increase their performance score year over year, so therefore ensuring that continual improvement. The criteria intensifies as you move ahead in the scoring. You can kind of see here, if you're getting a score of 1, you're kind of monitoring regulations, and all the way up to a score of 5, where you're really excelling and leading in those. So again, it's completely voluntary, just helps us to steer our focus. We do an annual self-evaluation, and every second year there's an external verification that happens. Our results are public, they're made public every year, and we keep our certification. Again, we only keep our certification as long as we keep improving every year in this program. It's a great program. This is just continuing on with Green Marine because it ensures we consider those meaningful aspects that are directly related to our industry. So the performance indicators, here's the categories that we look at. The first one at the top there with the little trophy, that's environmental leadership, moving around the clock, community engagement, waste management, spill prevention, greenhouse gas emissions, and underwater noise. So these are kind of the categories that we have to really focus on and make sure that we're hitting our benchmarks and we're, again, moving ahead in those aspects. Kind of funneling through the Green Marine, something that we like to talk about here is waste management. So waste management, again, was one of the indicators in Green Marine. And I'll just tell you quickly how in 1 year we jumped from a score of 1 in our waste management to a score of 5. So we jumped 4 points in our Green Marine performance on that. So the way we did that in 2018, we recognized that, hey, we need to move this indicator where we're just not doing really well. So we took a critical look at our internal waste management processes. We did a very extensive informal baseline study, and we were able to recognize that the extent of our waste generated and what the extent of our waste generated was and how much of that waste was going to the landfill. With that information, we then implemented tangible strategies that aimed at reducing our waste to landfill. So we started the year averaging that 1% of our waste was being diverted from the landfill, and we ended with about 65% of our waste being diverted from the landfill. We were pretty happy with that. Kind of moving, this kind of all transpired because of our waste management program. When we implemented that program, we really challenged staff. We really put the challenge out there to really think, you know, before you're dropping that into a waste bin, like really think about, is this the appropriate place for it? How are we going to dispose of this? And because we were asking that, we got this comment back, and members of our team reached out and they were saying, hey, we collected some rope. So this would be the old discarded or lost fishing lines or vessel ropes, etc., from the property, and they didn't like the thoughts of like you know, this just goes into the garbage. There's nowhere to put that. So we did some investigation. We said, let's hold the rope. And we did some investigating. We reached out to our friends at the Huntsman Marine Science Center, and they told us about this great rope recycling project that was initiative of the Debris Free Funding Program. And we immediately signed on with them, said, yes, we want to be a partner. At the time, they had 6 4x4 rope collection bins that they had placed strategically along the coast, from Grand Manan up through to St. Martin's. And they were collecting rope. They're getting folks to collect rope in there, and then they were taking them to a recycling facility. So we jumped in and we put 9 more of those bins on our property. We strategically located them on our property, and we asked all of our terminal operators, we encouraged them to participate by filling the bins with any discarded or end of life rope that they collected. So to date, we have collected and removed over 16,000 pounds of rope that would have ultimately ended up or remained in the harbor or in the landfill. So the rope gets distributed to a local recycling facility, and currently the product is repurposed by local artisans, crafters, and DIYers. My whole garden fence this year was rope. We really like this effort, and we're kind of proud. We like to take a moment there just to brag that we were recognized this year for by the International Association of Ports and Harbors as a finalist in their World Port Sustainability Awards. I should mention here that very recently, within the last couple of days, our rope recycling program has kind of been at a standstill. The recycling facility is under new ownership, and they're just kind of sorting things through. So for the moment, we're hoping that this is a short-term impact, but we're also hoping that the new owner can source a viable customer for this product. Throwing that out there in case anybody knows of something out there. The other thing that that we do is supporting those local environmental stewards. You know, I love that when I came here, it really opened my eyes to what's going on in our community and the great works that's happening. We should all know these things. We reflect on our strategic on our strategic priorities and making sure that we connect with those environmental stewards. And we're pleased to have the opportunity to support very important initiatives that are conducted in our harbor and in and around our community. Some of our friends that we continue to support are Eastern Charlotte Waterways, ACAB, Canadian River Institute, and many others. The photos on this slide on the left show Eastern Charlotte Waterways deploying some underwater sound monitors from our survey vessel. And then on the right, that's the collection of microplastics for baseline studies that's conducted by ACAP. So really cool initiatives, really interesting. Yeah, and then this year we really heavy into this now. We're just my deadline is coming up and we're almost ready to roll on this. So really happy. We'll be rolling out a revised integrated management system this year. So this system will meet the requirements of ISO 45001. That's a safety international standard. And 14,001, that's environmental management systems. For anyone that's not familiar with ISO, ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. So this organization develops and publishes a wide range of proprietary industrial and commercial standards that are recognized as the best industry standards worldwide. So instead of trying to meet, you know, if you have a management system, maybe it's an environmental or safety or what have you, one of those, and saying, okay, like, how do we know if this is any good? Well, we meet the Canadian standards or we meet the American or European. This is globally. So it takes all those standards and says, okay, what is the best practice? So it really sets the bar. So you know that it's recognized. So through the revision of our system, we will be held to, again, another process of continual improvement and external verification. This is this one is one that is a certifiable program that we'll be rolling into. So ISO 14001 and 45001 require the PDCA model. So that's that plan, do, check, act model that we should all really get used to doing. So that is to say that in every aspect of our business activities, we will ensure that we are investigating risks and impact, taking purposeful steps to plan for those risks, and then mitigating before doing any of those activities, and then evaluating how we did and looking for those improvement opportunities. So this has been a real big kind of discussion that we've been having for a while. And like I said, we're really excited to get going with our ISO journey here in the next few weeks. I'll turn it back over to Paula.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, so just last slide, just because we are never sort of resting on our laurels with anything we do here. I would say that across our organization, we're very type A personalities, but sort of the next sort of thing we see forward in this area is development of a decarbonization plan. I know it's something we talk about here conceptually and the need for it quite a bit. And so I see that as something that's going to be coming up. And this process of embedding the change in our corporate culture and how we make decisions. Somebody had asked a question, I think it was Jerry, and I just typed a response back in the chat box. I would say it wasn't difficult to make a change for us at all because there was so much interest from team members to do so. What's difficult is maybe making a change as quickly as we would like. So we may want to go from A to B tomorrow, but sometimes it may take 6 months, a year and a half to get where we need to go. And that's just part of, picking up and changing process is not an easy thing. And then finally, the last three there are things that we're talking about potentially implementing a community liaison committee modeled after one that Halifax has right now. And I know the airport just started one here in St. John. Right now we have one that's very focused on COVID and cruise resumption, but we want to do something like that that's more globally about the port. So that's a goal for next year, and it would help us in our metrics on both green, marine, and the ISO that Kelly mentioned around environment. And then I mentioned the cruise protocol several times, so that's very much on the 2022 objectives. And then Jane Burchell, who I mentioned earlier, is on my team and works very closely with Kelly and I on sustainability, and is going to have more focus in that area going forward. And together we're going to build a 5-year sustainability plan, and Jane's going to lead the development of that. So that will be something we'll begin to talk about in the new year, I would say publicly more. This year we are doing our first sustainability report, which will be the baseline for the future reporting on the various categories we discussed earlier. And we're working very hard on making sure we get that out in the 2021 year. So those are sort of what the future looks like in sustainability for us. It's growing in workload and growing in importance in our organization. So I guess I'll turn it back to Jerry.
All right. Well, you caught me off guard there for a moment.
We tried to get through everything in a very fast way.
Well, I thought it was just a terrific presentation. Thank you so much. There was a lot of information there and a lot of really great news on programs that I didn't know you guys were doing over there. And I just think it's outstanding. So we didn't have a lot of questions in in our chat. But one of the questions I had are stakeholders who operate container businesses drawn towards St. John because of programs like this? Are they seeking out, ports who are saying, you know what, let's make this a priority. Let's make sure that the ports that we do business with are looking to be sustainable and those type of things?
I mean, I would say yes to that for the container sector for sure. The major container lines that we have calling here today, which are Hapag-Lloyd, MSC, and CMA CGM, all three have sustainability initiatives and programs very much embedded in their corporate culture. The terminal operator, which is DP World, they definitely have it. It's a very much a focus of their worldwide operations. This terminal that they have taken over as of 2018 was probably not that far along its sort of development in that area, and they're bringing it to the next level as they upgrade and modernize their systems alongside us upgrading the infrastructure. And the way it works in a container terminal is that, and any other terminal that has a terminal operator, is that the Port Authority is responsible for the superstructure that everything sits on, and the terminal operator is responsible for the actual equipment. So for example, the cranes and all the equipment that moves everything on site. And I know there's a lot of conversations that are going on about, going to a hydrogen-based fleet and all of that for the land-based container terminal operations. The industry is looking. I mean, I don't think they've chosen the path forward on that, but I think they're looking very strongly at the hydrogen model. And short answer to your question is that I would say that it's probably part of what they're looking for in choosing a port,
Right.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so the facilities they're going to need for moving forward, if they do go that way, are aligned to what you guys are looking to for your 5-10-year plan. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. I got another question here. It says, could you expand on the Indigenous content and outreach and how it connects with the Port of St. John's sustainability?
Yeah, so it connects with us from the aspect that we want to respect the lands and waterways in which we operate, and that has always been part of the environmental part of our sustainability and our strategic plan. But we are now connecting that very much more with the relationship we have with Indigenous nations and communities in this province. We work with particularly St. Mary's and I can't think of the other one. It's gone out of my head. MTI, which is part of the Mi'kmaq, and Jane, can you remember the other one? I can't. My mind has gone blank. In any case, we've been talking with them about the need for including, because we have an opportunity as a port authority of including their story of how these lands and waterways were used. And so, while we consult on project-based discussions, which are required, legislated for us to do, we also want to build up that knowledge, talk to knowledge holders about the history of how these lands were used so that we can begin to talk about that when we tell the port story, either to commercial folks that are coming here, or if we build it into our education programs, which are widely used. We have about 800 to 1,000 students each year that take part in our education programs. And we have an opportunity there to build that into that content that they are learning. So we regard it as part of the right thing to do from a corporate perspective, but also out of respect of the fact that we are creating commercial value on the lands and waterways that are their traditional territories.
I think that's awesome to include the Indigenous groups in with education and everything else. I think you're definitely on the step in the right direction for sure.
And we're in the infancy on that, but we're coming.
Well, it's terrific. I mean, you got to start somewhere. So you partner up with some of the groups, and you just move forward with it, and everything comes down to start. You have to start. Yeah. So that's awesome. You guys have it in your plan and you're working through it. I really like that. One of the other questions I have is, could you explain the environmental impact of dredging the harbor?
I'm going to put that one over to Kelly.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So as far as dredging in the harbor, everything that we do, it goes through an environmental, it's an approved process. We work with the government to make sure that, the plan is approved, there's a permit to do so. There's always testing that's involved. So we want to make sure that whatever's being dredged, because, we've got those great tides and the sediment's always changing. We want to know what's there. Or, if there's anything that is contaminated that shows up that we're not, bringing it somewhere else. But it's one of those things that, we need to dredge. We just cannot operate. Those tides, it changes every day. We're constantly out there kind of battling the tide changes. So sometimes what we have to do is do some offset projects on the side and make sure that we're kind of, we're making an impact that we are offsetting by putting this opportunity out there and an enhancement somewhere else as well. And it's kind of a hard question because there's maintenance dredging and there's project dredging, and they're kind of two different things, and the impact kind of varies there, and it varies very much by just the location. This has been an operating harbor for a long time, so it's been very much an industrial harbor and industrial in that capacity. But there's a lot of studies that are happening right now in the harbor, and I think I showed you like ACAP, et cetera, and there's studies on just these things for the Ocean Protections program, and they're getting a lot of baselines, and I think we'll see some further data, some real tangible evidence that will show up there.
That's cool. I like that you're partnering with the different groups like that and moving forward with collecting the data, because if you can collect the data and all that, you can manage it. And when you can manage it, then you can, monitor it and, have a baseline, say, are we doing good? Are we doing bad? I think that's a great part for sure. Another question I have is, does the port have a plan for environmental shore power for the ships?
You want me to speak to that, Kelly?
Yeah. How about
Okay.
that? Yeah.
Okay.
More your level right now.
Okay. Yeah. But mainly that we looked at it a few years ago. And the reason we didn't choose to move forward at that point was that the fleet that was operating in this region, because there are, hundreds and hundreds of cruise ships around the world, but the ones that come to this region were a specific stock of ship that they weren't ready to handle the shore power when they got here. So they didn't have the equipment on board to be able to take use of it. So at that point in time, the investment was deemed to be something that we wouldn't move forward then. But every once in a while, this comes up again, and it's kind of like a tipping point when the fleet gets to a point that the capacity is there for the use of the equipment. Then it would be something we would look at investing in. But a few years ago, when the emission control areas changed for this region in shipping, the governments worked with the sector on these shipboard emission control systems and came up with some other mitigating things that they're doing with scrubbers and different things on the actual ships, sort of to take some positive step towards it until the time when we can get to the point where we have shore power supplied in every port. Because although a port may have shore power, not every ship can use it.
Right. No, I can understand that for sure, and I could see, you once you see maybe it becomes more standardized over the next while. Maybe it'll be worth the investment at that time. So that's
right.
Another great point for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have any more questions in the big box. Oh, wait a minute, we just had one come in. Related to the harbor question, how do you judge if an environmental impact is good or bad? Do you assume that dredging is bad environmentally, but good economically?
Is that a me too, Kelly?
I was just going to say that we definitely evaluate, we closely evaluate every activity that we do. We assess everything any of us do, there's some kind of impact to the environment, and we assess every aspect. What is that impact? What does it look like? So it's not just the fact that, yes, it's good economically. We cannot operate without dredging. Like right. the entire port cannot operate without dredging. That's just kind of the bottom line of it. But we're always looking at the kind of risk of to what level could we dredge or not dredge, or what's viable or whatnot. What is the impact and the outcome? And we make those decisions based on that.
I think it's interesting too. I'll add here, just because I know Jane had mentioned it would be of interest probably to folks, but the large slips that are going to be filled in over on the west side that you could see, like the pier went across the slips and then they have to be filled in to be able to utilize that as land. We are able to put our dredge spoils in those slips. We have permit to do that. So we won't have to take them out to the outer harbor in the spot that we're designated to put our spoils, but we'll be able to use them to repurpose that land, which is kind of an interesting little fact that the project has embedded in it, and I wanted to mention as well. And another little just interesting thing is recently when they were doing some work at Long Wharf, because of the small craft facility that's going to go in there, they dredged up some timbers from old pier structures that were there dating back to the 1800s. They were stamped with the date on them. Very, very cool. Yeah, it was very cool, because that's these structures and wharves that we see today are basically built over other structures and wharves that were built hundreds of years ago, or more than 150 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, our port's been around for a long, long time, so you would certainly come across something like that. The fact that the dated the log and the cribbing is quite interesting. That's cool for sure. I mean, we've got you guys have brought up some outstanding points. I really want to thank you very much for bringing us this presentation. I learned a lot about what's happening over there. It's not just about expanding the port, but all the really good things that come along with that, being sustainable and environmentally, for sure. So thank you both for taking the time to discuss this outstanding work. And I want to thank everybody for attending today's event, and I hope everybody will look forward to our next one, which will be coming soon. And I wanted to also again thank our sponsors, the Port of St. John and Commercial Properties Limited. And I just want to also remind everyone that if you want to get involved, becoming a board member with Sustainable St. John, or you have ideas for anything else for us for future presentations, please feel free to reach out to us at info@sustainablestjohn.ca. So one last time, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jane, and everybody for putting this together. And thank you, everyone who came. We really appreciate it, and we thank you, and hope everybody has a great day. And again, this will be put on YouTube as it was recorded, and everybody will be able to take a second look and share it around. So I say thank you, and I say I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.